The project is part of a wider digital storytelling project. You might have seen on our social media platforms, we've been sharing some films and videos using the Your Sporting Story hashtag. The project is all about supporting organisations and individuals like yourselves to gain confidence in sharing stories and collections on digital platforms. It's a really great thing to do at the moment, creating and sharing digital content to reach your new and existing audiences. Since the recent lockdown, more and more heritage and sports organisations have turned towards this as a method of communicating their collections and stories. So we really hope that the webinar shows you how easy filmmaking and sharing can be and gives you a bit of confidence to start making some films of your own. We'll talk about this as we go through. So to introduce the team, I'm Kate Turner. I'm coordinating this project with Belinda Scarlett. I'm a heritage consultant. I work on projects from research and exhibition development to digital resource development and evaluation. I'll be acting as a kind of host for this session. I'll field all the questions and lead the Q&A at the end. In a moment, I'll be handing over to Belinda Scarlett, who is listed there as Justine, but she's just using the Sporting Heritage Zoom account. I promise you that is Belinda. She's going to be talking you through some key tips for sharing your objects and collections, creating a narrative and a story. Belinda has 15 years of experience in the sports heritage sector, focusing on managing, interpreting and increasing access to collections. She's currently curator of women's football at the National Football Museum, so she'll have some really great examples to share with you. After that, we'll hand over to Cy Gamble, who will talk to you about actually creating, editing and sharing your film. Cy's the film lead on this project. He's worked in video production and marketing for 10 years, working in TV campaigns and corporate and entertainment projects. As I say, at the end, we'll have the Q&A. I've collected some of the questions that you sent over in response to my email, but do just keep adding questions to the chat as we go through, and we'll field as many as we can at the end. So I'll hand over now to Belinda, and I'll turn off my video and sound.
Hi everyone, I'm Belinda. Hopefully you can hear me. I will be showing a presentation throughout my part of the webinar, so I'll just do that now. There we go. So my part of the presentation will focus on storytelling and interpretation. I'm coming at this project from a curatorial perspective rather than a marketing one. So I really want to try and explain to you and make the case that it's great for curators or the owners of sporting collections and the people with the expertise in sporting collections to get involved in digital content. And to really drive how digital content is made. I think it's good for you, it's good for your organisation, and it's good for your collection as well. So Kate has already gone through quite a lot about what the project is. It's funded by Art Funds UK, and obviously it's in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think generally there is a shift towards remote working and engagement that sporting heritage collections can really be a big part of. We aim to upskill the sports heritage community, and the real aim of this project is to create a short bank of films that we will be able to share via the Sporting Heritage CIC platforms using the hashtag Your Sporting Story, but that hopefully you will also be able to share on your platforms as well. So this section will quickly look at why we think digital engagement and video is important, how to get started and find your audience. And then the main bulk of it will be about digital storytelling with some examples from my work at the National Football Museum. And then finally, what to do next and how to become part of this project. So why get involved in digital content from a curator's perspective? I think digital content is an opportunity to engage with new, younger and often more diverse audiences who don't or can't access your physical archive or museum. And for me, it really helps to grow an audience that's interested in your collection and the stories that it holds. And using collections as the focus point of digital content for me is really key. it leads to deeper and longer term engagement, and hopefully based on interest in your collection, people can engage in other the work that you do, and hopefully also eventually visit your museum. A lot of grant funding needs a digital output. And I think digital engagement or testing digital engagement can really help you make a case for a larger interpretation project. So if you have an idea for a piece of work that you want to do, testing it digitally can often be what you can use in a grant funding application to show that there's an interest in that subject. And more generally, obviously, digital content increases people's awareness of your collection, your expertise, amongst the public, but also obviously amongst the heritage and sports sectors. So I'm just going to stop briefly to try and admit somebody. I'm not sure if I can do that now. So again, why get involved in digital? For me, digital is not just the responsibility of the marketing team. I really think it's an opportunity for curators and the owners of sports collections to really drive the direction of online content and tell the stories that you want to tell about your collection. It can really help them make a case to other departments that a particular subject or a theme is of interest to people. Obviously, adding new stories or objects to displays can be slow and expensive. And this is a really good way of testing content and responding to it. You can use digital content to quickly make links between your collection and contemporary events as well, helping your organisation to stay relevant. So why focus on video over other types of digital content? Firstly, audiences like video. There are a lot of people who will use platforms like YouTube to access content, particularly younger people. It's really immediate and it's entertaining. It grabs people's attention quickly, but at the same time, it also leads to deeper engagement than perhaps other ways of presenting heritage stories online, such as digitising collections, virtual tours and blogging. They can be more difficult and time consuming to get off the ground than video. It's relatively simple, and hopefully Sai will be able to explain that you don't necessarily need to buy any new equipment to get started. So how to get started? Find your audience first of all. Try and remove the fear. Storytelling is something that we do every day in our museums and in our lives. First of all, think about who your audience might be. Who do you want to watch your videos and engage in the work that you do? Is it existing audiences, or is it new audiences who might not even know that you have a collection or what your collection holds? Or are you trying to make or influence people within the sector? It's important to identify who you want to speak to when creating content and use the right materials, narrative and tone of voice to engage them. And don't worry, I think developing an audience takes time, and you might be surprised with who engages with your content. So as an example of all of these points really, we at the National Football Museum really wanted to develop our audience for women's football, and we have used lockdown really as a way of testing some of the content that we put out there about women's football, just to see if the audience exists. And it's been really successful. It's helped me to make a case to our marketing team in particular that if you put this type of women's football content online, people engage with it, and we've had some great success. It's actually outperformed some of our other digital content during lockdown. This isn't a marketing plan, but this are some sort of top tips about what you need to think about before you start, particularly if you've never done this sort of thing before. So decide which social media platforms you want to use and share your content through. So initially, this might just be Sport and Heritage CIC, or you might do it through existing platforms that you or your marketing team, if you have one, control. If you've never used social media before, register your social media names and try and keep these consistent. Try and have a plan about how many times you want to post. Try and keep this consistent as well, and relatively frequent. You might have very small capacity within your team, and if it's realistic for you to do this once a week, once every 2 weeks, then as long as you stick to that and have a plan, I think that works really well. And again, think about your initial audience. You probably already have this identified, but who do you have in your existing network who can help get this off the ground? Encourage them to subscribe, like, comment and share your content. So selecting an object or selecting a story. you've got your audience, you've got your initial plan. I think there are a few basic questions that you can ask of an object. And if you can answer these questions about your object, you've really got enough content there to produce a short video. And it can be relatively simple to start off with. So at the moment, obviously, it might be that you only have a handful of objects that are accessible to you if you can't get to your archive. But try and choose one that you think will connect with your target audience. Try and choose an object that's visually appealing. Will it look good on camera? Can people tell what it is? Try at home holding it in different ways and from different angles, in different lights, and just see what it looks like. And does it have detail that you can focus on? Using video means that you can focus on small detail within an object, which you potentially couldn't do using other types of platform. With sporting collections in particular, it's really useful if your object links to an event, a player, a team, or an anniversary, and use these as an opportunity to choose an object and get real traction for the content that you put out. Again, if it links to a contemporary sporting story or a contemporary issue, that's another opportunity for you to really highlight something that you have in your collection and to stay relevant as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to admit somebody into the meeting late. There we are. Okay, so here we have an example of an object that I actually do have at home from the National Football Museum's collection, and it's a medal that was awarded to women playing in an unofficial Women's World Cup in 1971. And I think this object is a good example of how all those basic questions can be asked of the object to create a really interesting and relatively easy short video. So we know what it is. It's interesting to look at. It has quite a lot of detail on it, so using a video to focus on that detail would be really useful. It links to a particular event that we know the date of, we know when it took place, who took part in it, and what happened. So we can use all of those as basic storytelling techniques. Just talking about those things will give you maybe a 30 to 1 minute video that will hopefully engage people with something that they've never seen before. But once you've got past those initial questions, you can really start to think about developing your story. So can you feature new acquisitions in your videos? Can these objects say something about your new approach to collecting? So for example, we're trying to reach a 50% representation of women's football objects at the National Football Museum in our collecting. So a lot of our new acquisitions are about women's football, and we could feature quite a lot of these in a video and really try and engage a new audience with those. How do you want your audience to feel? Do you want them to be emotionally engaged? And can you tell personal stories? For example, could I potentially get in touch with one of the women that played in that tournament and get her to tell her personal stories to really deepen engagement? Can an object tell us about the wider context in which it was made and how society perceived or valued a sport or sports person? I'd assume that some people don't know that there were international tournaments of that size and scale happening for women's football in 1971. So again, this object can really challenge narratives, and it's your opportunity to do that by making digital content about it. And again, I've mentioned this earlier, but the test content, test approaches, take a risk on an object. If it doesn't work, nobody engages with it, then you can move on and try something else. And you must also try and include a call to action at the end of your video. What do you want people to do as a result of watching your video? Do you want them to subscribe to your channel? Do you want them to visit? Do you want to direct them to other parts of your digital content? So once you've got used to using one object potentially in a video, I think it's a good opportunity to really think about and plan themes and a longer term digital project. For me, I think online storytelling works best when you use objects or stories that are less well known. I think if people feel like they're learning or being given access to something that they haven't seen before, this is really key to getting them to keep coming back and see more of what you've got. So I would recommend using a theme to plan. So can you have a series of objects that all relate to a theme that you can produce a series of videos about? So this will help you if you have a bank of say 5, 10, 15 videos that you can release on a regular basis. and hotfully people will really start to learn from your collection that way. And another great tip is to use other voices and perspectives. So if you use your platform to give people a space to talk about their experiences, it really demonstrates what type of organisation you are or where you want to go. So for example, we could use women who played in this tournament, or another example at the Football Museum is we had created a digital version of our current temporary exhibition, Strip, which looks at the design of football kits. And we've used lockdown as a way of actually interviewing female players about their first football kit, and we've done a whole series of Zoom interviews which are now available on our exhibition website, and they've been really, really popular. And giving people access to other voices and perspectives about the National Football Museum's themes and collections has really worked. So again, this is more sort of from a marketing perspective, how to expand your audience. Keep posting frequently, don't lose momentum, try and measure what viewers respond to, encourage, react and respond to comments, look for collaborations with established channels or for other people as well, and really use your extended network. And try and post longer videos. There are minimum channel requirements that I think we might go into later, but if you want to post something longer, I do think if the content is strong and the quality is good, people will watch that. So we found that people will engage with longer videos, almost 5 minutes on the National Football Museum YouTube channel, which are thematic. So we have something called First 11, which was put together between our Learning and Communities team and the curatorial team, where we choose 11 objects that talk about a particular theme. And our women's football First 11 was the highest performing of all of those videos. So finally, what to do next? Try and set yourself a challenge and a target. So if you've never produced a video before, and as a result of this webinar and this project, you can create your first video and share it as part of the Sporting Heritage Storytelling Project. Use the hashtag #YourSportingStory. Set yourself a target for how many new followers you want as a result of your digital content on your chosen platform, say by September. And keep in touch with us, follow us, and even consider joining Sporting Heritage CIC. You can keep in touch with me and Kate. So if you are right at the beginning of your digital journey and you want some support to create your first video, then please get in touch with me and Kate. We'd love to try and help, and then we can share your video as part of this project. So Kate and my contact details are there. We'll be sharing this presentation as well at the end of the webinar. And if you do have any specific questions that we don't get to answer today, we have a Twitter hour on Monday between 7 and 8. So that's Monday, 10th of August, between 7 PM and 8 PM. So I will now hand over to Si. So hopefully, can you do that from their side?
Can you hear me okay? I'll do the... Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Lovely. Let's start the screen share. Okay, so you should be able to see my slides now.
Belinda, if you just stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, I've just done that.
Okay. All good with that. So I'm assuming everybody can see my slides, so I'm just gonna crack on. So the whole point of this section is basically to go over the video production aspect, try and simplify a quite complex topic. So it's aimed at an introductory level, but if anything does go over your head, please drop a question in the chat and I'll do my best to cover it at the end of this. Again, I've come up with a few rules as well throughout this just to try and make recording a little bit easier. So if any of that does go over your head, please do, again, drop a message in the chat and we'll try and cover it later. Before I start, I wanted to show you a couple of similarities between different devices that you might be using. So the majority of people on here will have one of these, obviously a smartphone. The similarities between this and other cameras are as follows. So we've obviously got the lens section here. Within that, we'll have a sensor, which basically processes the light. and then a lot of software gimmickry and technology and things that goes off within that to obviously make sure that you get a picture at the end of it. Again, we'll move on to DSLRs, which again, some of you might be familiar with this. So again, we have a lens section of a DSLR, similar to the lens section on a smartphone, except a much, much bigger, obviously clearer picture from that. If I just snap the lens off, I can then show you within that section there is the actual camera sensor as well. So this is, again, this is what processes the image and gets you a picture at the end of it. And then we'll move on to something that looks a little bit more professional. Again, this is nothing to be scared of. So this is my typical video camera, which again, this is sort of high budget stuff. I've put a lot of stuff on it that makes it look quite expensive and complicated. But if I strip this down to its bare minimum again, I'll show you where the sensor is on this. Give me 2 seconds. Here we go. So again, we have the lens section of the camera and a sensor section within here, which obviously again processes the image, processes the light, and gives you a picture at the end. So the way that cameras work, they're all pretty similar. Obviously from the smartphones that you'll be using. So I think the whole point of this today is to basically just prove to you that cameras are nothing to be scared of. They're all technically the same. They're all there to do the same thing. And a lot of what we're talking about today can be achieved with just a simple smartphone. So we'll crack on. The aims of this section, obviously, like I said, I've split it into two parts. So we've got part one, which is all about your equipment, which is going into what tech do you actually need? Do you actually need something as expensive as a DSLR or a video camera? And basically going into understanding the equipment that's available to you. So going into stuff that's more around smartphone technology and more basic technology and affordable technology, stuff that you've got available to you every day. The second part of this will be based on production. So that's to gain an understanding of simple production techniques. I'll chuck in a few top tips in there as well and things to sort of help you get going. So let's get started with part one. So in 2019, 79% of people in the UK own a smartphone. To contrast this, digital camera sales have dropped 84% since 2010. So that's a massive sort of sway towards mobile technology. Obviously, because cameras on phones have got a lot better and are pretty much on a par with technology that we had in sort of compact cameras 5 years ago. There's no need to actually carry a compact camera around. So because of that, most people who own professional cameras nowadays are either hobbyists or professionals themselves. So there we go again. So no longer a need to have expensive equipment. It's all about creating content and creative content. So let's go into what tech do you actually need to make a video. So when it comes to creating content, a simple smartphone will do pretty much everything you need. They're so good now that we're seeing it used in even broadcasts, especially during lockdown. You'll have noticed that a lot of broadcasters are resorting to using mobile technologies to get their celebrities on air. The technology's there now. Sort of 5 to 10 years ago, that had all been heavily pixelated. You wouldn't be able to tell what's going off. In this section, I've put together a bit of a rough guide to help you understand the advantages of each type of camera. So we're going to go into the mobile technology, the DSLR cameras, and then the video cameras after that. I should point out as well that a lot of what I'm going to suggest here is sort of prices for new and second-hand things. So I've put together a rough price guide, so it should point out that the prices will vary depending on whether you choose to buy new or second-hand, and also vary depending on the features that each device has. So a lot of my equipment comes from a few websites. I actually go to websites called MPB, CVP and Wex Photo, and they're great second-hand websites, and they use grading metrics to obviously grade how good their equipment is, so you're not running the risk of basically going on eBay or any other auction sites and ended up with some duff equipment that's actually really, really accurate grading, so you know exactly what you're buying basically, and it's a great option for if you're low on budget, and you've got low or no budget to work with. So let's go into the pros and cons of the compact cameras and smartphones as well. So we're looking at a sort of range of between, we say free because most people will pay a contract for these, free to sort of £200 range. So this is the like real bottom end of the camera range. So the pros of obviously using compact cameras and smartphones is that they're cheap. There's absolutely no maintenance whatsoever with these. They're really easy to use. Because they have built-in sound and everything's automatic, so you can literally just pick the camera up, point it at you, and you just crack on. And the number one benefit of this is they're very portable as well, so you can put them in your pocket, take them on holiday, you can do your sort of vlogs of anything from anywhere in the world. Really good with that. The cons of using this type of technology, so the smaller sort of compact cameras and phones, they have small lenses, so they're also not interchangeable, so you're sort of stuck with the lens that's on there. And because of that, also the sensors inside, the sensors that I was showing you earlier on the other cameras, they're also really small sensors, so the detail isn't there. But for most web applications, they'll be absolutely fine. Again, referring back to the broadcast stuff that we were talking about earlier, broadcasters are using smartphones, and they're quite happy with the quality of that. So let's move on to DSLR type cameras. So that's the cameras that I showed you earlier. So DSLR type cameras are also fairly compact options. They're the next step up basically from your sort of phones and your compact cameras. The pros of actually having a DSLR type camera are that you get a bigger sensor. So when I showed you earlier, the sensor's a lot bigger than what was in a phone. The sensor in a phone will be tiny. It'll be sort of like this size, whereas DSLR, you're talking like a lot bigger, which means that basically you can capture more quality. You can also change the lenses on them, so that gives you a lot more sort of scope for changing lenses, so you can get wider sort of aspects and you can get closer aspects of different types of things. So for example, if you wanted to pick out details on a particular item, a medal or something, for example, you can use a longer macro lens to really zoom in and show people the details, the sort of right in the intricate parts of your object. They also do have automatic mode, so you can just pick them up and point and shoot, which is a massive advantage again. So you're getting a much better quality picture from the larger sensor and the better lenses, but they've also got the automatic settings within that, so you can basically just pick it up and play around with it until you sort of get comfortable to switch it into manual mode. The cons of obviously DSLR type cameras are the price of them. They're a lot more expensive. They're sort of talking about the sort of £200 to £1,000 mark. If you go onto second-hand websites like MPB or something like that, you'll be able to get something really good in that range. The weight of them, they're really not as portable. They're still not bad, but not as portable as the compact cameras, and obviously something that you can just put in your pocket like your phone. There's a bit of a steeper learning curve if you want to go into sort of the manual modes and have a play around with it. And obviously DSLRs are more leaning towards photography sort of features, so the video features might be slightly lacking in those models. So finally, just to move on to video cameras. So the last camera that I showed you is a big video camera like that. Obviously the pros of that is that you get everything that you would get in a DSLR type camera, but you have more features for moving image, so you get more sort of features such as like slow motion, more features for plugging extra audio bits and pieces into the camera, which obviously gives you more scope as you sort of get going. There's a higher image quality through sort of better data capture and things like that. I'll try not to overcomplicate this, so if you've got any other questions, just pop them in the box below. Again, they tend to have sort of automated settings as well, so you can sort of switch between manual and automatic modes to sort of help you with that. Obviously, the cons of video cameras are they're incredibly expensive, and the learning curve can be really steep if you sort of go into the manual modes on that, and they're really not portable at all, not simple to set up, so it can be a bit of a headache if you're not used to working with video. So when you're looking at buying a camera, if you are looking at buying a camera or you're using your existing phone or anything like that, don't get too hung up on resolution. Resolution is basically what a lot of manufacturers refer to when they say sort of HD or 4K or 8K. It refers to the amount of pixels. Resolution is a bit of a marketing gimmick, in that obviously a 4K camera phone is not going to be the same quality as a 4K video camera, because it's about the quality of the pixels, not the amount of pixels, basically, to sort of put that in a basic way. Again, I won't go into too much detail, so if you want to know anything more about resolution or anything below, just pop a question below. So to conclude this section, compact cameras, smartphones, a great way to get started. If you do want to do more advanced production techniques, sort of like getting nice macro shots and things and close-ups of more detail and stuff, then you might look to sort of invest in a DSLR or video camera at a later point, if it's something that you really get going with. Okay, so I just want to go over lighting as well. So in this slide, you'll hear me talking about light sources. So a light source is anything that's either natural or man-made that emits light. So it could be a window, for example, this one coming in on my left-hand side. So it can range from a window to any purpose-built lighting fixture or anything like that, that we use for sort of film production, or a lamp or something in the house. Again, it's important to point out that good lighting can be achieved on any budget, even no budget. So it's just all about thinking about it, and I'm going to give you a few tips in a second on how to think about your lighting and how to make things look as nice as it can, even on compact cameras and smartphones. So it's nothing sophisticated. So the best place to start is with the sun. So essentially shooting during the daylight, the sun, it's free, it's an even, reliable source of light. It's out every day, so you don't have to worry about sort of going and renting it from somewhere. So basically, if you're shooting on a smartphone, even anything, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Shooting on a smartphone or on a DSLR camera, make sure that you position yourself near a window. So basically, placing a window in front of yourself between the camera is a great way to start. Direct sunlight, however, can be troublesome. So if you look at, for example, there's direct sun coming in over my shoulder. For small cameras, it can be a bit difficult for them to process what's going off. So you'll notice that the exposure keeps changing as I'm moving about. If I turn towards the light more, the camera would adjust and basically expose me a lot more evenly. So it's just something to bear in mind, that this is exactly what happens if you're not facing into a window. The cameras and the automatic sort of features that they have will start struggling and changing exposure and not know where to focus, basically. So if you're filming at night or in a dark room, it's important to use household lighting as well. So think about how you can bring light into an area. Things such as lamps are great for bringing in some nice soft light into your video. And soft light as well is important to reduce glare on reflective surfaces. So if you're showing like a medal, for example, or something with reflective or glass or anything like that, you want a soft light such as a lamp, something that's gone through some sort of fabric, just to basically soften down the light so you don't get glare, so people can still see those really important details. And finally, the advantages of buying some film style lighting. So the stuff that you can see pictured here are that you can control the light a lot easier. So the pros of owning film style lighting is that you can adjust the direction, you can adjust the intensity of the light. You can often change the color temperature as well. So you can do some nice things with that. Again, prices for that sort of kit range from sort of anywhere from £50 up to like £500 for a reasonable setup. Again, if that's something that you want me to go into more detail on, pop a question in the box below. Again, if you just follow the previous tips about filming near a window and things like that, you really don't need to worry about lighting. So finally, on this part of the section, I just want to go over sound really quickly. So built-in sound on compact cameras and iPhones and smartphones and things is really, really good nowadays. I've just got 2 top tips to basically help you get the best out of the sound from those sort of systems. So tip 1 is to basically stay reasonably close to the camera. So I typically say anywhere from 2 to 3 feet away is sort of optimal. So that's like an arm's length away. The further you are away from a microphone, especially onboard microphones like that you get on cameras, on compact cameras and smartphones, it basically means that the sound's got longer to travel. So there's more competition from the room and sort of bouncing off surfaces and things like that. So it just basically means that that the sound isn't as good quality. So if you keep it close, it'll be absolutely fine. And this links nicely to tip 2 as well. So move to areas that are quiet as well, which seems like an obvious thing, but if you're in sort of public areas and places where people are moving about, or if there's noisy appliances and things like that, it's better to try and move to a place where there's less competition for your voice on the camera. Anything that's distracting at all to the viewer will obviously put them off. Just to link in, so if your camera, like your DSLR or your video camera, if it does have some sort of audio input onto it, there's maybe 2 sort of options that you might want to consider to basically improve sound quality. One of them is a Lav microphone. So these are like the ones that you see at the top of this slide. They clip on usually and they point straight at the person. And the second one is a shotgun microphone, which is the one that's pictured in the bottom right. So again, this is a microphone that's shaped a bit like a sort of long sausage. In fact, I've got one here. And basically, again, anything hitting the end of this microphone is basically going to get recorded. Anything that's beyond the end of the microphone will get emitted. So they're really good for using in noisy environments, for example. So we'll just move on to part 2, which is based on production. So this is more around how we get the best out of the areas that we're filming with, a few top tips as well on how to get the best out of your production. So first of all, we want to start with assessing the film area. So when assessing an area for filming, I like to pose these top 3 questions basically. Is it quiet enough? Is the space bright enough? And is it in context, and does it send the right message? So I'm going to just go over these points really quickly individually. So starting with, is it quiet enough? So it's really important that your audience can hear you clearly. So remember to place a microphone close to you. Again, that 2 to 3 feet distance rule will really help. And pick an area that's away from noise. So again, this means avoid public spaces, avoid areas with noisy appliances, air conditioning, that sort of thing. It all sort of interferes. Another tip on this as well is to avoid holding the camera. So if you've got something, a smartphone or anything like that, try to sort of place it down, try not to hold it, because what happens is the microphone gets handling noise on it. So it's basically any sort of minute vibrations or anything on there, the microphone will pick that up. And finally, the most important tip of all as well is to speak clearly, speak slowly. You may be speaking to people where English isn't their first language, so that's a really, really important one. Okay, so to move on to the second question around what space is right to film in, is it bright enough? So cameras need light to expose properly, so they need a lot of light as well at sometimes. They don't do well in dingy environments. So anything where there's low light, you'll start seeing noise and the picture will start to break up. And you'll probably notice that if you've ever FaceTimed somebody in a dark room, you'll come up as quite heavily pixelated because the sensor there isn't enough light hitting the sensor to basically be able to process an effective image. So it's important to think about the time of day. That's especially important if you don't have any additional lighting. It's obviously better to film during the day, and if you can't film during the day, again, consider using household lighting. Turning lights on, interior lights, lamps and things like that's a great way to get enough light hitting the sensor. It's also really important to angle cameras away from light sources. So I tentatively covered this earlier, and this is what the diagram's about in the top right. Lenses don't cope well with hard light. So for just looking at this again with the light coming in over my shoulder, the side of my face is all sort of burnt out. So you may notice this, or you may notice that the lens starts to flare if there's a light source coming into it, and flaring is where you get streaks of light and it's really distracting. So basically try not to point the camera towards a light source. Try and place the camera in between the light source and the presenter as per the diagram there. Okay. I'll move on to the next slide. So the final question, and this is something that was covered a bit earlier. So is the area actually in context, and does it send the right message? So it's always really important to pick somewhere that's in context. It's fine to film in an empty room or something like that, but you might want to pick something at a location that visually illustrates what you're talking about. Having trophy cabinets and things in the background, museum spaces is a great start as well. So it makes the viewer realise straight away what you're talking about. Make sure the area is clear of clutter as well. Move last night's tea out of the way. And finally, don't film in a bathroom. And by this I mean that the light might be good, but it might be completely out of context from what you're from where you're coming from. So if you're trying to create a professional image or something like that, really think about the backdrop. So this is moving on to the final part. Thanks for bearing with me with this. It's quite a complicated thing to try and get into sort of 15-20 minutes. These are the last two slides as well, and on these I'll hopefully bring you an insight into editing and uploading as well. So you finish recording your clip, you're ready to share it. If you're using a smartphone, this could be as simple as just hitting the upload and send. If there's a bit at the beginning or the end that you want to trim off, most smartphones now have a trim or a crop tool built into it. So you just go into edit. I'll show you an example of that in a second. Check your user manual if you don't know how to do this, just to trim the beginning and the end off if you've got any sort of awkward pauses or anything like that in there that you want to get rid of. So another top tip is to avoid the temptation to use filters as well. For me, filters and these Instagram filters and things, it cheapens, it distracts from the message. It might make your skin look sort of nicer, but when you're focusing in on objects and things like that, it'll do funny things to sort of change the look of the objects and might distract from what you're trying to say, basically. If you do need more editing or want to get a bit fruity with your production by adding logos, text, branding, etc., then you might want to opt for some sort of desktop or laptop software. If you want any pointers on what sort of software to use, I've got a few sort of free low-cost suggestions as well. Pop a question below and I'll be happy to answer that at the end. And finally, we've covered this earlier. A lot of people ask me about how long an edit should be as well. Again, to echo what Belinda said earlier, I'm a believer in it's as long as it needs to be. If you can get a story in over 60 seconds, I mean, the shorter the better for people with shorter attention spans. But if your story's engaging, if it's an interesting anecdote built in with that, if you've got multiple people talking about the same thing, then really don't be afraid to stretch it out. I often watch YouTube videos that are sort of 10-15 minutes long if it's something that I'm personally interested in. So really don't be too worried about it. Just concentrate on quality and the content that you're creating. Audiences will listen to content that's creative and engaging. Having said that, to make your lives easier, it might be easier to start with shorter videos, 30-60 second videos, just showing like 1 or 2 features. Remembering that obviously consistency is key. So creating more content is shorter content, more content is better. It's better to publish regularly than publish one clip every sort of month. So this is just showing you an example of the 2 types of edit software that you get. This one on the left is built-in sort of mobile phone software. So you can see here that you get a trim tool. This is relating back to if you need to crop anything from the sort of beginning or end of the video. You also get some sort of color controls in here. You get some basic text stuff as well that you can add sort of some text on there if you want to add your name or anything like that. Really, really simple tools, but really powerful if you've just recorded an absolutely perfect take of something. You just want to add a few bits of text. Just do that. Send it over and upload. The one on the right here is an example of something that's a little bit more complicated. So just show you some of the features on this. This is Premiere Pro by Adobe. So you get multiple layers of video. So if you've got multiple takes, you can add different layers and sort of cross dissolve and things like that over different tracks of video. You've got multiple layers of audio as well, so you can add sound effects and things like that. Again, this is stuff that's probably not needed at all. You get more control over the motion and where you're placing things in an image. You can add graphics and things. So it's basically just a lot more sort of advanced features than what you get on your simple sort of mobile phone editing software. So just to conclude my part of the presentation, I've just put together some really quick 5 top tips to help you get started with video. Number 1 is ultimately be brave. I know in today's times it's really difficult to sort of put yourself out there, but I think just do it. It's one of those things that you'll get better as you go along. Don't listen to too much criticism, but listen to feedback from your audience if they want to hear more of a certain part of a presentation. Concentrate on doing the best with what you have as well. So I keep going back to it. Smartphones are absolutely fine for doing this type of work. They're really, really high quality, really easy to use. Just get started with that. Just record a quick sort of self video talking about your topic. Remember the 3 questions that we posed earlier. So when assessing a room and if it's okay for filming, number 1, is it quiet enough? Is it bright enough? And number 3, is it in context with what you're talking about? Number 4, I've seen a lot of people fall foul of this as well, in that they get overexcited and go out and invest a load in equipment, buy really, really expensive cameras and lenses and things. I think it's more important to concentrate on the quality of the content. Invest in equipment as you gain momentum. If it becomes something that you're posting regularly, getting good feedback on the audiences are growing, do that. Basically just avoid the temptation to go all out from the off. You really, really don't need that equipment to start with. And finally, again, just to go over what Belinda said earlier, post little and often. So simplify your productions, make shorter clips that help keep your story going. And there's a slide there for some signposting if you want to screenshot that of the websites that I mentioned to get some secondhand gear and some editing software, sort of low cost and free options as well there. So that concludes my part of the presentation. Any questions? Pop them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them. I'll hand back over to Kate, I believe.
Great, yes. So hopefully you've all got something out of those presentations. As I say, we will send out the PowerPoints to you in the next couple of days. So don't worry about trying to scribble all of this down now, or if you've missed anything, you will get it. If Si, you're happy to stop sharing your screen now, and if Belinda, you want to come back, we've got about 10 minutes to go through some of your questions. Hopefully a lot of the questions that you sent me in advance have been answered, or at least touched on. Things like somebody asked about using PowerPoint as a way to edit film. hopefully you've seen some of Si's suggestions there, and hopefully you've seen that there are some more kind of comprehensive free programs that you can use. Also things like, should you have a thematic approach? Hopefully Belinda's presentation will have shown you the best ways to go about telling stories. We did have a specific question about a storyline. Belinda, I don't know if you wanted to kind of clarify how you would create a storyline before you do your video.
In terms of scripting something in advance,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would always script something before I started to record it. Although it's quite good to sort of ad lib a little bit, I think if you haven't thought about your structure before you start, particularly if you've got quite a limited time frame, I would always try and script something, but or at least have a bare bones of a script. If it's an object you know really, really well, I think often you can just go with it. But I would definitely try and script something before I started to record.
Yeah, gives you a bit more confidence.
Yeah.
We had a few questions about specific collections and whether or not they should be uploaded and shared digitally. And there are options of, like Belinda said, creating online exhibitions like the Football Museum did for Strip. But if you do have really good stories or really eye-catching objects, it's nice to create a series of films like we've said. And just to reiterate, a really good way to make sure that you're reaching your audiences is to tap into your network. So for example, we had one question from Bristol Rovers History Group. So it'd be good to get in touch with Bristol Rovers and to look at who's engaging with their social medias and maybe start to share some of their hashtags and look at sharing some of the tags that they're using. A specific question that came up during this, which is similar to something that somebody asked in advance, is can you walk around when videoing instead of just sitting in front of a screen? And can you video outside? Si, what would you say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was talking about holding the camera earlier, I think a lot of sort of compact cameras and things like that have tackled this issue now with holding the camera, so it relates more to sort of older technology. So especially with like mobile phones and things now, they're that good at sort of damping any sort of hand vibration or anything like that that basically the onboard mic doesn't pick it up anymore. So I think walking around with the camera is absolutely fine. Again, these are just sort of suggestions to sort of try and cover a wide range of different situations. With recording outside as well, absolutely fine. Again, try and put the sun somewhere where it's not in your eyes, but that's obviously not behind you as well. So angling off to the side slightly. So if the sun's sort of up in front of you, maybe angling it off to the side slightly, placing the camera up back at yourself so you're not blinding yourself looking into the sun. But yeah, the most important thing is basically just don't point the camera at the sun. So obviously you'll just get lots and lots of light streaks and lens flares and all sorts of things going off, so people won't be able to see you. Yeah,
that's great. We had a question which was, how long should a video be? I know that both Belinda and Si touched on this and said it can be as long as you like, as long as it's engaging, but it might be better to create a series. One thing I would point out is if you want your video to be embedded on Twitter specifically, it needs to be no more than 2 minutes and 20 seconds. You can obviously create longer videos, upload them to YouTube and just pop the URL into your Twitter post. This means that people will be able to click through and go straight onto your YouTube. But if you are wanting to create a kind of regular series, you might want to stick to that 2 minutes and 20 second time frame if you want it to be fully embedded. The only other one that's got a maximum, is Instagram, which is 60 seconds, unless you're using Instagram TV, and then you can go as long as you like. The format is quite important. If you have a video which ends in MOV, that won't upload directly. You need it to end in MP4. But it's very easy. If you Google MP4 converters, there's loads of free converters online. I use cloudconvert.com, and you just pop your video in whatever format it's in, and it will change it into MP4, and you can pop it straight into your social media. Okay, we have just a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. We had one question about how many items should be filmed at once. Do you have any thoughts on whether you could talk about more than one object in a film?
I would. I think people at the moment are quite forgiving, although it's great to have a really professional video. If you are moving around and selecting between objects, I think that's absolutely fine. As long as the storytelling is there, then I wouldn't worry too much about making it look like you are a professional filmmaker. If you work for an organisation that does have somebody within it with quite strong digital skills, I think it's really important then for the curators to sort of dictate the storytelling, and then the digital person can make the links between the objects look smooth and professional. So I absolutely think it's fine to use more than one object in a video, particularly if you are going for a longer themed video, which is maybe 5-6 minutes long, something like that.
Yeah, great. I've just noticed that Anita responded to what you said, Si, and asked about wind noise on the mic.
Yeah, because I just noticed that one too. So I'll just give you an example. So apologies, this is the microphone that I'm using, so you might get some handling noise here. So basically this here is a shotgun mic, which is like the one that I spoke about earlier. And basically the advantage of investing in this is that it's much better for using outside when there's a lot of wind. You typically get something like this, which is like a wind stopper type thing. They sometimes look a bit like a bad hair day as well. So they've got like lots of sort of fluff coming off them as well. You simply pop that over a shotgun mic and it reduces the wind noise considerably. Something like that should be absolutely fine. If you're struggling, again, if you're struggling with, let's pop this down. If you're struggling with wind noise and you haven't got that sort of equipment, just think about the area that you're filming in. So maybe move to somewhere that's sheltered next to a wall or something like that, or use trees and use the environment more. Basically, it's just, it's absolutely fine, again, to use sort of compact cameras and things like that, but it's just about thinking smarter about how you use them.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if there's no more questions coming through on the chat, I think we've covered most of what was asked beforehand. So it's just to say thank you so much for joining this session. Hopefully what you've realised is that anybody can make a film. It doesn't matter what equipment you've got. If you've got an engaging story, you can make a film and people will want to watch it. We'll be sending over the PowerPoints in the next couple of days, along with a little bit of evaluation. So it'd be really great if you could answer a couple of questions. Sorry, Anita says, do you plug that mic into your phone?
I was just about to type a response then. So yeah, you can usually buy adapters and things where you can plug into phones and things like that. That will give you something. I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head, but I'm sure there will be something out there.
Brilliant. Yes, so if you do have any further questions, we are having our Twitter hour on the 10th of August. The three of us will be there from 7 till 8, and that will just be on Twitter. You can just come along and we'll look at any questions that we haven't covered or anything that's come up since. We do have something else coming up in the series. As we said, this is part of a wider project. We'll be looking at podcasting in the future. So keep an eye out on Twitter to see when we'll be doing a similar tutorial and webinar about that. But in the meantime, just get filming. We're on hand. You've got our email addresses and they're on the PowerPoint. Send us over your videos or post them onto Twitter with the Your Sporting Story hashtag, and we'll create a nice bank of sporting videos for everybody to engage with. I think that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for coming, everybody, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.